Chapter 841, The Mortal World is Filthy Again. As mentioned before, Mr. Fang had the last godly weapon fragment that the system gave him as a reward. It was his last trump card, but now wasn't time to hesitate. At this moment, Mr. Fang browsed the content on the system interface. Mr. Fang was about to make the move when the system interface beeped. New task: play safely and peacefully at the Internet Cafe. 3. Task description: ever since the shop was opened, it has been favored and loved by countless players. Now, their safety is threatened due to the shop. Despite the disturbances of the small powers and spells which are like tickles to this shop, always remember, you can play safely and peacefully at the Internet Cafe. Task target: fight back with the most dominating method. Show the world that any people who dare to mess with the shop will bear the consequences. Task reward: 1 Immortal Beach gift box. There is a chance to get an unripe Immortal Beach, lower chance to get a ripe Immortal Beach, and the lowest chance to get a 6,000-year-old Immortal Beach. 1-2 random items. The quality of the items in the gift boxes will be determined by the performance. Task description: when accidents happen in the shop, as the owner, you must actively find a way to solve it. You can't sit back and watch. Mr. Fang looked exasperated. Aren't I trying my best to solve it? On the second thought, he decided to take the task since he would do the same thing anyway. But my performance will influence the quality of the items in the gift boxes. Mr. Fang thought for a second. What character should I synchronize with to achieve the greatest performance? At this moment, the horrifying lightning pillar was crashing down. Countless cultivators and warriors unleashed their sword techniques and spiritual spells viciously against the destructive lightning pillar. However, they couldn't block it. The lightning pillar connecting the heaven and earth fell without stopping. It's over now. Guiyu gazed down coldly at the city, streets, and countless horrified mortals under the illumination of the lightning energy. At this moment, it wasn't important whether this was a big or small issue. All rebels must be punished, and anyone who dared to resist the punishment would be turned into ashes of tribulation. We've cultivated for tens of thousands of years and are not here to reason with ants like you. As a direct descendant of the Gui family, Gui was also the leader of the immortal army in the Connate Cliff. Even among the immortals, he was a lofty existence. With this act, he would tell everyone that no one could withstand the fury of certain existences. Not a city, a nation, or even a whole world. He seemed to be enjoying the beautiful view of these creatures' last moments in life. He tried to see a trace of remorse or horror on their faces. But sadly, he didn't see any of it. Instead, he saw something that he had never imagined before. The city which had been ravaged by a flood, a storm, and demon beasts shook violently. Even the land, sky, black clouds, and lightning bolts shook violently. They seemed to be shivering. It seemed like even the heavens and earth were shivering. The storm that had been raging a moment ago suddenly froze. Then, streaks of dazzling light shot up from below, and the huge lightning pillar in the sky suddenly paused. Looked down from the distant high sky, everything on the ground including debris, water currents, and tiles seemed weightless as they slowly floated up toward the sky. It even seemed like the distant ocean which had gradually calmed down surged up with huge waves that were thousands of meters high. The rainbow-like lightning pillar shooting down from the sky didn't land. Suddenly, it began to shatter inch by inch. Countless streaks of lightning energy shot in all directions as if a lightning bolt from hell exploded in the mortal world. Some of the scattered lightning snakes shot into the forest outside the city and caused blazing fire, and some shot up into the sky, forcing the immortals to retreat in fear. Then, the lightning pillar in the sky completely collapsed like a bamboo shoot that was being vertically chopped by an axe. When the lightning energy dispersed, the night sky which had been covered in dark clouds suddenly turned bright as if it was shined on by sunshine. Many colorful clouds appeared as if the dawn arrived early. With a slight wave of a pair of hands, a thread of dark golden sunshine fell from the ninth heaven and shined on the impeccable face unerringly. The golden-plumed headpiece sheened with dazzling golden sunshine. Dressed in a wide and impeccable black robe which was decorated in elegant and luxurious ancient glittering jewels, he looked like an almighty emperor descending to the mortal world from the ancient heavenly realm, with slightly closed eyes and a smile on his impeccable face. His deportment, grand presence, and all features were perfect. This is all the cultivators and warriors in City almost dropped to the ground. This is Chi-Tandi. Chi-Tandi? How? How can he come to our world? A greater amount of horror instantly struck them. They almost screamed in their minds. Since the Saint Demon Vital Embryo couldn't bear all of Chi-Tandi's power, this being could only use a part of his power which was neither too low nor too high. After Mr. Fang trained diligently in the cultivation room, he was able to synchronize with this character. Who are you? In the sky, the huge face transformed from thunderbolts slowly shrunk and turned into a noble-looking young man who was dressed in a blue robe with silver patterns and had a cold expression on his face. He was Gui Yi. After staring at the scene intently for a while, he sneered and said, I heard from the Green Sky Immortal that this shop is backed by some defiant gods and immortals. It seems like she's right. But, Gui Yi said while laughing, you are such a little god, how dare you to fight me? With a flick of his hands, 2 streaks of immortal lightning turned into 2 eye-piercing light beams and crashed toward Chi-Tandi like 2 furious dragons. The blinding lightning bolts drew a trace of deep darkness as if they had torn open the sky. At this moment, Chi-Tandi didn't move, he didn't even open his eyes. Then, a streak of dazzling light was emitted from his body before dispersing. The 2 lightning dragons seemed to crash onto a natural barrier, as if pulled by an invisible force. The 2 dragons encircled Chi-Tandi from dozens of meters away and then exploded. The shower of thunder and lightning bolts swept backward so much that it forced Gui Yi to retreat several steps. At this moment, Chi-Tandi opened his eyes. The mortal world is filthy again. Chapter 842, Who's the God of Destruction? This is real. In City, countless people yelled uncontrollably with horror in their eyes. At this moment, they felt like they were in a dream. My goodness, our mortal world is not filthy. Su Tanji was frantic like an ant running on a hot pan with her mind turning blank after the previous narrow escape from death. She pointed in the opposite direction and said, it's them who are filthy, go and hit them. At this moment, everyone saw Chi-Tandi slowly opening his eyes and indeed turning his gaze toward the opposite direction. Who are you? Gui Yi looked a little startled and asked in a grave voice, Chi-Tandi. With every word he said, heaven and earth shook as space became unstable, hovering high in the sky. He didn't land on the ground as if the land would shatter instantly once he descended. TL note, Chi-Tandi means heaven deserting emperor in Chinese. He ha ha ha. Gui Yi laughed wildly at his words before saying, if you've deserted the heavens, how dare you call yourself the emperor? I've never heard of this name before. I'm afraid that you've given this title to yourself in the past 100 years. Are you the one behind this whole thing? You have some abilities. Tens of thousands of immortal soldiers spread out behind Gui Yi like wings, covering the whole sky. Then, a long whip appeared in Gui Yi's hand, engulfed by purple immortal thunderbolts. The whip seemed to be able to instantly shatter the surrounding space as purple lightning bolts jumped on it. Now, I will give you 2 choices since I'm a person who values talented people, Gui Yi said while laughing. You can submit to me, or my purple lightning immortal whip will shatter your soul. In the City shop, the cultivators and warriors stammered when they heard these words. What's your decision? Gui Yi looked at the horrified cultivators and warriors, letting the immortal soldiers behind him release all their presences. Glancing at the cultivators and warriors who became even more horrified now, he said with a snicker, or, DSK, it will be bad if we frighten these pathetic mortals. Mine a god from the alternate world. At this moment, Chitandi said with an indifferent and mild emotion in his eyes, as if he was stating an indisputable fact: they always overestimate themselves. Gui Yi's face instantly fell, and he waved his hand. Kill. Countless immortal soldiers drew strange arcs in the sky, forming a weird array and surrounding Chitandi, whom Fang Chi synchronized with. Then, countless colorful light beams were emitted from the soaring mist, while countless blazing purple essences turned into heaven-burning flames, shooting forward. Passed down from the ancestors of the Gui family, the flames had extremely high temperatures. They were the blazing sun heavenly fire that could even melt real immortals. They were so fast that an average immortal wouldn't have time to react. Almost instantly, they devoured Chitandi. Seeing this, Gui Yi froze and then sneered, "If you can't even block the blazing sun heavenly fire, then..." Before he could finish, he saw a scene that he had never expected. A huge vortex began to spin in the center of the purple heavenly fire. Countless heavenly flames flew backward like petals of a blooming lotus flower. The immortal soldiers who were caught by the flames screamed. The harder they tried to put out the flames, the higher the flames grew. Finally, the soldiers fell from the sky. In the high sky above Connate Cliff, many of the immortal soldiers corresponded with what was happening in the mortal world. They screamed as blazing flames appeared on them, and they fell from the sky like shooting stars. At this moment, a layer of invisible but solid protective essence shield lit up around Chitandi, and he was intact and hadn't moved a muscle while standing in the center of the essence shield. At this moment, even Gui Yi felt chills running down his spine. "Who on earth are you?" The strengthened Saint Demon Vital Embryo can't contain a ton of power. Synchronized with Fang Chi, Chitandi turned his hands slightly and said coldly, "But it's a piece of cake to destroy you." Protective Essence Shield 21 he blocked it with. That? What is with Chitandi's Protective Essence Shield? How can it be so strong? In the Geocity shop, some warriors asked in shaky voices. Obviously, many people who had watched the TV series didn't study the content carefully. Nalan Mingsu explained, "There are 2 layers of the protective essence shields. It's formed by the extra essence that the Saint Demon Vital Embryo can't contain. The 2 layers of pure forces of essence can't be breached by any skills. Even if a layer is breached, it will recover instantly. So, he doesn't need to defend. No. Impossible." Gui Yi's narrow eyes stared at Chitandi intently and said in a chilly voice, "It must be hard for you to stand here, right? You are forcing it. In fact, you are burning inside and suffering from the pain, right? Anyway, we'll find the answer in the next moment. Everyone, put all your force into the array." Gui Yi yelled. "God's flames." At this moment, Chitandi, who was synchronized with Fang Chi, turned his hands, and streaks of purple-blue flames shot up into the sky. With Soul Yin, nothing can be born. With Soul Yang, nothing can grow. But God's flame was ultimately pure and contained not a single spot of impurity. Instantly, the purple flame engulfed the heaven and earth. About 10 immortal soldiers standing in the front line couldn't retreat in time and were turned into ashes at a visible speed in the soaring blazing flames. Then, hundreds of soldiers behind them were engulfed by the blazing flames. Except for the soldiers standing in the distance at the back, at least half of the invading soldiers were turned into fireballs and fell from the sky. A little while later, their number was greatly reduced. At this moment, Chitandi began to unleash the second technique, God's Vortex. The third technique, God's Light. The fourth technique, Earth, Fire, Wind, Metal, Wood, Water. The techniques that Chitandi casually used were within the boundary of the 5 elements but broke the coexistence of yin and yang. Every move that he made summoned the ultimate form of the purest single element. Each technique was a catastrophe that could instantly destroy the whole world. In the sky, countless immortals were attacked by the wind, thunderbolts, lights, and flames which swept across the space while shrill screams sounded occasionally. No one would doubt that this was the scene of the real god of destruction that had descended to the mortal world to destroy it. A drop of cold sweat fell from his forehead. Gui Yi said in a grave voice, "I see, you're an evil god." He had never imagined that these real immortal soldiers, even though they were summoned by him from the lower region and didn't have pure foundations, would be butchered like weeds. With great efforts, Gui Yi bit on the tip of his tongue and dripped a drop of pale golden immortal blood on the long whip that was emitting dark purple thunderbolts. The purple whip lit up inch by inch, and then he lashed it toward the crowds. The first layer of essence shield lit up and broke, then, the second essence shield lit up and broke. No one knew what kind of artifact it was, but it broke 2 layers of essence shields with one strike. His eyes brightened. "You shall die." Chapter 843, The Master of the Gui Family. The purple lightning bolt arrived in the blink of an eye. The horrifying thunder fire shot toward Chitandi, who was battling with the immortal soldiers in the array. It was launched from the trickiest direction and with the chilly presence of a viper. In a previous battle, the purple lightning immortal whip scattered the soul of an evil god in one strike. It can even easily break the essence shields. Regardless of how powerful you are and how great your abilities are, I don't believe that you can block this strike. Seeing that his attack was about to hit the target, Gui Yi finally revealed a cold smile. Meanwhile, a tremendous heavenly fire swept toward Chitandi from the array built by the immortal soldiers, trying to engage all his attention. However, at this moment, while dealing with the immortal array, Chitandi, who was synchronized with Fang Chi, lifted his right hand and blocked all the attacks. Then, his left hand lowered and then struck out. "You dare to take the strike with your palm of flesh?" Gui Yi's smile turned chillier. But in the instant when the palm touched the lightning whip, the force of purple lightning bolts suddenly poured back without stopping. One coming in, and one rushing out. 2 streaks of terrifying opposing lightning energy collided in the whip. Gui Yi even felt as if the immortal whip couldn't withstand the force of the collision. However, this immortal artifact was personally made by the artifact elder of the Gui family by killing a demon dragon and pulling out its meridians and blood and collecting the purest purple immortal lightning bolts in the godly sky, with the top-tier materials and the delicate creation process. It wasn't an average immortal artifact and wouldn't be destroyed like this. Since this was the case, the only result was that one of the forces would be subdued and then pour back. What's this move? In the Geocity shop, everyone saw the purple lightning whip sneak attacking in the sky but was blocked by Chitandi with a hand. Like a horrifying huge abyss beast, a greater purple lightning bolt instantly devoured the small purple lightning snake and forced it to turn around and go back. It seems to be the reverse of demonic origin. Nalan Mingsu obviously had studied this and explained, in simple words, it reflects the incoming damage. Is this possible? This is. Song Qingfeng stuck his head out of the door and watched tensely while saying, "This is an attack from an immortal. Besides, this artifact isn't an ordinary device. The Saint Demon Vital Embryo is a perfect life form that Chitandi created to hold his awareness in the mortal world. Even though it can only contain a small part of his power, it has many abilities. It isn't an exaggeration to call it a human-shaped weapon. Even if we ignore the 2 layers of protective essence shields, this body is so tough that it can't be easily damaged. Even if this body is hurt, it will instantly recover." Nalan Mingsu explained, the TV series purposely left a weakness in this body when it was created, but this one, it seems like it is even better than the Saint Demon Vital Embryo, perhaps. It's flawless. If Mr. Fang heard this, he would add in his mind, after all, it's a creation of the system. Flawless? Everyone stared at the figure hovering in midair and remaining still under all the attacks. You can actually 21. Seeing this, Gui Yi lost all his cool and composure, while his pupils contracted to the size of the tip of a needle. Only horror and a trace of viciousness could be seen on his face. Explode. Instantly, the purple immortal thunder whip exploded, letting out a surging force which vented out in all directions. Then, a radiant purple lightning bolt instantly engulfed the entire sky, turning the world purple. The immortal soldiers who was touched by it were turned into ashes before they could even scream without exception. At this moment, Guiyi's immortal soldiers were crushed. They no longer looked like immortals, and their formations were messy and chaotic. After a long while, the purple lightning bolts in the sky gradually dimmed. Is that immortal dead? A group of people stuck their heads out of the shop and looked up at the sky. Look at the sky. Someone pointed at the sky and said, it seems like he's not dead yet. In the sky, the arrogant Guiyi, an aristocrat from the ancient immortal Gui family who came here dressed in a noble and elegant robe, now looked disheveled as his robe had become rags. His body was covered in bloody scratches and scorched lines. A shiny golden heart-protecting mirror had flown out from his robe and blocked most of the damage, which was why he survived this destructive explosion of a top-tier immortal artifact. At this moment, Chitandi only moved a few steps back with some scratches on his body. Just as mentioned before, his wounds all healed in the blink of an eye as if those scratches were just an illusion. How? How can it be? Guiyi asked in a shrill voice. The purple lightning immortal whip is a top-tier immortal artifact even rarely seen among the immortals. How can it be? With disbelief in his eyes, he asked. Who the heck are you? Why are you fighting our Gui family? By now, the immortal soldiers all retreated to stand behind him while asking in their shaky voice, Mr. Gui, what should we do now? What should we do now? With shaky hands, Gui took down the heart-protecting mirror which had saved him in the catastrophic explosion and was hovering in midair. Then, he injected immortal spiritual energy into it. On the mirror, extremely ancient golden runes appeared. As the spiritual energy continued to enter the mirror, the golden runes appeared in the sky from the reflection of the mirror. With a slightly crazy laugh, he said, "You're indeed a powerful evil god, and I'm not your match. If I were someone else with the same cultivation strength, I wouldn't even have the chance to escape, but..." Guiyi suddenly yelled furiously with a distorted expression. What do you think our Gui family is? He slowly lifted the miraculous godly mirror and said, this 9-palace godly heart mirror is a gift from the wondrous spell High Holiness, the sword-holding elder of the Gui family. It contains the full force strike of that elder of the Gui family. Chitandi slightly waved his hands in the sky, looking indifferent as if nothing in the world concerned him. Foolish minor god from the alternate world, Chitandi said indifferently, you must know only I, Chitandi, can exist for eternity. Eternity? Guiyi sneered contemptuously and said, even those immortal masters don't dare to boast like this. After all, immortals have the same age as the heaven and earth. If the heaven and earth were destroyed, they would die as well. While they spoke, the figure of a white-haired old man appeared between the streaks of runes that shot into the sky from the mirror. The moment that the shadow of the white-robed and white-haired old man appeared, a horrifying force condensed, and the heaven and earth around him shook continuously. The immortal figure that suddenly appeared in the sky, the horrifying immortal spirit essence, and the force that was gradually surging showed a level completely different from that of Guiyi who was standing below. Looking at this streak of immortal light, Guiyi had a reverent and manic expression on his face. He said with extreme pride, are you shivering? You'll die without regret after witnessing a move from the wondrous spell High Holiness, the sword-holding elder of our Gui family. Chapter 844, Minor God from an Alternate World. You did your best. In the sky, streaks of eye-piercing immortal light fell, and the shadow of the white-robed and white-haired old man waved the whisk in his hand. His move contained the wondrous rule of the heaven and earth and corresponded with the miraculous heavenly Tao. At this moment, the remaining immortal soldiers and the elite subordinates behind Guiyi let out gasps of disbelief. They couldn't believe that Guiyi still had such a trump card and that the Gui family was so powerful. Wow! Is this the power of the Gui family? so horrifying. Below them, the people in the Geocity shop watched the battle in fear and said in low voices, "It seems like Chitandy had only used a few casual moves in the God series and the reverse of demonic origin to reflect the attack. It seems so." Chitandy's God series of moves included God's Hand, God's Fire, and God's Lightning. It was equivalent to launching a streak of godly power and then turning it into different forms such as fire or lightning. These moves were easy for Chitandy to use. However, the godly power contained the purest forces. The fire would have the ultimate yang force, the lightning would have the ultimate direct force. Every force was on the ultimate level. At this moment, Chitandy slightly lifted his left hand, and a world-destroying move was created by his palm. Driven by the godly power, the violent gusts sweeping between the heavens and earth, in turn, they increased the godly power. Above Chitandy's left palm, a mini tornado appeared, making the heaven and earth change color. Also, even Chitandy's hand lowered slightly as if the force in his palm wasn't a weightless gust but a world of storms that was even heavy for a god. Then, he lifted his right hand. A bright blue lightning bolt transformed by the godly power shot out from his palm and turned into a lightning tree that connected the sky and land with ear-grating destructive noises. Under the light, the whole world turned pale. Looking up into the high sky from the city below, people saw Chitandy lifting the two ultimate godly forces of wind and lightning as if he was lifting two worlds. Instantly, violent gusts swept across the whole human realm with flashing lightning bolts. While sand and debris flew in the sky, the world dimmed as if it was the end of the world. At this moment, the old man waved his whisk in the sky, and a layer of lightning bolts struck down. Almost at the same time, the world-destroying forces of wind and lightning gathered in Chitandy's two hands gradually became one as he brought his two hands together. When the two forces collided, facing the godly power of wind and lightning that could move mountains and seas and sensing the world-destroying godly presence, not only the mortals but even the immortals felt tiny and insignificant. Minor God in the alternate world. You did your best. The moment Chitandy said that, everyone including Guiyi saw an unbelievable scene. The lightning bolts only held on for one moment under the force of the godly forces of wind and lightning before completely collapsing. They didn't realize anything when they heard the words that Chitandy said, but in the next moment, an ultimate fear struck their hearts. Like a world-ending catastrophe, the power of wind and lightning swept up everything with the power that could move mountains and seas. The extremely horrifying force viciously crashed toward Guiyu and everyone around him like a huge ancient mountain. Even though it was paused for 1 second by that streak of gathered mortal lightning bolts which combined the wondrous power of heaven and earth, no one could escape from this ocean-like power. Boom! With an explosive noise, Guiyi was sent flying backward by this extremely horrifying force despite the protection of the immortal artifact. All his internal organs and meridians were instantly broken. The people with lower cultivation strength were burned into coal or shattered into ash by the wind and lightning. No one in its path could remain intact. Horrified, Guiyi looked at the scene before him in a daze. How could such a horrifying demonic god exist in the world? Minor God in the alternate world, you did your best. You did your best. Did your best. This sentence echoed in Guiyi's ears continuously. Puh. Guiyi spewed out a big mouthful of blood and stared at the unrivaled god intently while yelling frantically, with your power, you can get a top position in the godly court with ease. Why? Why must you work against our Guiyi family? I have a question for you. Chitandy, who was synchronized with Fang Chi, said, this shop does its business without disturbing anyone. Why did you lead an army to suppress it? Hee hee. Guiyi said with a sneer. This tiny shop in the mortal world violated the taboo in the high realm, was rude to the immortals, and even refused to listen to admonitions, so, it must be destroyed? Okay. Fang Chi said, then, I'm now telling you that your rules have affected the business of my shop and must be changed. What did you say? Guiyi widened his eyes, not believing his ears. No one in the history of the world dared to say such a thing. Gui laughed wildly as if he had heard a hilarious joke. The rules jointly created by the innumerable immortal sea, the godly palaces, and even the godly court must change because they affect the business of your shop. Just because they affected the business of a shop in the mortal world? Yes, Mr. Fang said earnestly. They must be changed. At this moment, the people in City finally understood the situation. While laughing, they yelled in surprise, "Is he, Mr. Fang?" This time, that senior must have possessed Mr. Fang's body with his mind. I'm sure that senior helped him. He's so horrifying. He's much more powerful than Mr. Fang. I won't destroy your vital soul, Mr. Fang said. I'll spare your life so that you can bring back the message. Tell others that to ensure the prosperity of the Origins Internet Club in the lower region, you must change the related rules. If you don't change them, Humphrey, a small shop in the mortal world dares to work against our Gui family, the innumerable immortal sea, and the godly court. Regardless of how powerful you are, you're alone. You can defeat and kill me, but do you think that you can defeat tens of thousands of immortal soldiers and generals who will come to conquer you? Gui mumbled to himself and then yelled, I'll return and tell them your request, but it's not my business if they will agree or not. On Connate Cliff, a streak of vital souls rose in silence and shot toward the center of innumerable immortal sea at an extremely fast speed. At this moment, in the place where the heavenly faction disciples would dash, Faction Master Feng Zhu exhaled a sigh of relief. How are the casualties? He asked. We happened to pass this place and came just in time. Some are seriously injured but are safe now after our healing. The white-robed elder Xuanhuan said, I instructed the disciples to stay here and take care of them. They will be fine in a few days. At this moment, in the City shop dash, a group of people looked at the sun which was rising from the east. The sky is clear. It's indeed clear. A group of people yelled in surprise. They stood around Mr. Fang and looked at him up and down as if there was something special about him. It's over, it's over. Mr. Fang waved his hand at them. Then, they returned to the shop to buy instant noodles or play games. Ha 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 ha, a new day, another day filled with hope. Song King Fing laughed and yelled, let's go and finish our game time for today. Chi Tandi is so powerful. Finish what? Sutanji said sulkily. While yawning, she suddenly exclaimed, no, I forgot to prepare for my lecture this month. No, no. What lectures can you give? Mr. Fang looked at her in contempt. You will mislead students with your lectures. Why can't I give lectures? Sutanji said in a loud voice, I only give one lecture a month, but the disciples like my lectures very much. Can't talk to you now, I must go and prepare for my lecture. She left swiftly while standing on her sword. Chapter 845, Many Immortals Gather, 100,000 Immortal Soldiers. At this moment, in the immortal equal garden of the Gui family in the innumerable immortal sea. In the garden, immortal flowers bloomed radiantly, and rare plants competed with each other to show their unique beauties. At the same time, clouds and mist floated as radiant lights shinned. The pavilions were decorated with engravings of dragons and pictures of colorful phoenixes. On the 8 treasure jade table were all kinds of immortal fruits, wine, and nectar. Immortal maidens were dressed in colorful dresses, presenting a beautiful dreamlike immortal realm. The spiritual auspicious immortal flower is an extinct ancient flower which blooms once every 3,000 years. We're lucky that we can see it this year. A white-haired and long-bearded old man who was dressed in a green immortal robe stood up and said, the flower is very noble, elegant, and pure. If a mortal smells its fragrance, they can instantly obtain an understanding of Tao. If an immortal smells it, they can reach the great Tao. After seeing it today, I find it indeed deserving of its reputation. Then, he sniffed the intoxicating fragrance of the flower. This rare flower can only be seen in your place, High Holiness. I heard that the benefits are the greatest at the moment when the spiritual flower blooms. It is a rare moment that only happens once in several thousand years. Sitting next to him were the grand-looking Immortal Holiness and several awe-inspiring godly Tao generals. They took seats one by one. The people sitting in the front rows had mysterious immortal powers and reserved godly lights. The green sky immortal could only be seen in the last row of people. Everyone looked amiable and glowing. Before them were flower buds that was as smooth as white jade. It was almost time for them to bloom. They were enjoying the rare benefits of this moment. At this moment, two immortal officials hurried in with stumbling steps but were stopped at the entrance of the garden. The immortal soldier who was guarding the garden had a chilly light in his eyes. Wondrous Spell High Holiness is hosting the spiritual auspicious flower banquet. Today, the heavenly treasure Spiritual Holiness, Hell River High Holiness, and godly generals from the godly palaces are all here. Why are you coming here in such a frantic state? The elder is meeting heavenly treasure Spiritual Holiness. How dare you try to break into this banquet? I'm not being insolent. I have important military intelligence for the holiness. The two immortal officials said frantically. Important military intelligence? The guard frowned. I'll go in and report. At this moment, the old ethereal-looking Taoist dressed in a luxurious Taoist robe was showing the flowers to the guests in the garden. Hearing this information, he said, "Let them come in." Soon, the two immortal officials were led into the immortal equal garden. Seeing the majestic figures and wondrous spell High Holiness in the garden, they looked uneasy. "What's the matter?" Wondrous Spell High Holiness, the old immortal with white hair, inhaled the fragrance of the flowers with an intoxicated expression and didn't spare a glance at them. One of the two immortal officials was the rain officer who had cast spells at the Connate Cliff. Fatigued after casting spells for 7 days and 7 nights, he didn't join the battle but watched the entire battle from the Connate Cliff under the instruction of Gui Yi. He came here to report the result. Looking at the many guests, he felt hesitant. Finally, he said, "This is an important report." Humphrey? Wondrous Spell High Holiness, who was enjoying the flowers, looked displeased and snorted. A nearby immortal soldier scolded, "We have high immortals and high holinesses in the immortal equal garden. What report is so important that you can't say in front of them?" The rain officer was still hesitant. He asked tentatively, "Do you really want me to make the report here?" Seeing Wondrous Spell High Holiness's face turning darker, the immortal soldier reprimanded, "Hurry up and speak what you want to say." Resigned, the rain officer forced himself to say, "Okay." Mr. Gui led immortal soldiers to severely punish the mortals in the lower region who have violated the forbidden. Almost 100,000 immortal soldiers cast spells together and condensed tribulation lightning bolts, casting them toward the resistant mortals. "What happened?" one high immortal asked. The long-bearded holiness who was dressed in a green immortal robe cupped his hands at Wondrous Spell High Holiness and said, "The Gui family has great Taoist spells, and Gui Yi is an elite who had been through several battles. I'm sure that shop has been turned into dust." "No." The rain officer yelled in horror, "No?" Everyone looked at him. It didn't happen. The rain officer anxiously avoided their eyes and said, "At that time, we saw a golden light beam as tall as 10,000 meters, and the heaven and earth shook. Then, a figure appeared in the golden light beam and said, 'The mortal world is filthy again.' Then, the tribulation lightning bolt that was about to strike just shattered." "What? The tribulation lightning bolt shattered? The mortal world is filthy again?" The long-bearded heavenly treasure Spiritual Holiness repeated, "Who is he?" "Cheetandi." The rain officer howled in frustration. Everyone froze. "Who's Cheetandi? It doesn't matter who he is." Wondrous Spell High Holiness remained calm and said with a faint smile, "I gave that kid, Gui Yi, a spiritual mirror which contains one of my attacks. It's enough to deal with them." Wondrous Spell High Holiness, how long has it been since you last attacked? A nearby immortal asked in amazement. The person in the mortal world could force the Wondrous Spell High Holiness to attack. Heavenly Treasure Spiritual Holiness stroked his beard and said with a smile, "He can die without regrets." The immortals talked among themselves animatedly and laughed. Then, they asked, "What happened then?" The rain officer looked ugly while he hesitated. "I can't say." "What can't you say?" Wondrous Spell High Holiness stood with his hands clasped behind his back and said arrogantly, "Speak, then." Being yelled at by Wondrous Spell High Holiness and stared at by so many powerful figures for the first time, the rain officer grew even more frantic and confused. While gesturing with his hands, he said in a shaky voice, "Then, Wondrous Spell High Holiness's shadowy palm strike was instantly exploded by Chi Tandy. The aftermath even killed everything it touched. Even Mr. Gui only escaped with his vital soul." "What did you say?" Everyone looked at Wondrous Spell High Holiness and saw his glowing face instantly turning crimson. "Impossible. What happened then?" someone asked. Then, Chi Tandy said, "Minor God of an alternate world, you did your best." "What?" They looked at each other. "Minor God of an alternate world, you did your best." Everyone looked at Wondrous Spell High Holiness again. "Minor God of an alternate world too." The coolness disappeared from Wondrous Spell High Holiness's eyes, and it was replaced with chilly murderous spirit. He concealed the intention in his eyes very well, but his face was as red as a monkey's butt. The rain officer shrunk and howled in his mind, "This. You forced me to say it. I told you that I couldn't say it. Although this being indeed has some super abilities. This concerns a big issue, and they must back off." While suppressing his anger with effort, Wondrous Spell High Holiness said in a cold voice, "Tell them this. They are just a small shop in the mortal world, and they are messing with something that the force behind the shop wouldn't want to offend even if it was 100 times stronger. They are messing with the heavens. If they could subdue the shop without a fight, they could somewhat redeem themselves." He nodded slightly to himself and thought, "Those who are experienced are smooth with all situations." He wanted Mr. Gui to pass on a message for him. The rain officer said in embarrassment, "What word?" They said, "The rules jointly made by our innumerable immortal sea, the godly palaces, and the godly court have affected the regular business in his shops, so the rules must be changed, otherwise, gather 100,000 immortal soldiers for me, then, gather immortal generals from all places." Before the rain officer could finish, a voice roared, "Outrageous, lawless, I'll show these ignorant mortals how high the heavens are and how thick the earth is." Chapter 846, The Immortal Beach Gift Box, Abundant Prizes. The rain had gradually stopped. The cultivators of the heavenly faction wiped sweat off their foreheads. "We can't relax yet," Faction Master Feng said in a loud voice. "This is just the beginning. The war isn't over yet." At this moment, the disciples who had just gotten some free time checked their communication jades and said, "Faction Master, the war has just ended." "Ah?" Feng looked baffled. "Didn't it just start? How come it's over so soon? Aren't the immortals from the immortal realm going to cast immortal punishments on us? We prepared for so long and took a lot of time to make the final decision to fight the lofty existences. The war just ended like this. Can't you keep your promise?" 21. A disciple handed him the communication jade, and he read the messages. Shocking, Chi Tandy used his god moves, saying, "Minor God of an alternate world, you did your best." Hut 21. This post, let me see. They stood closer and began reading the post together. "Okay. Since our teleportation array is finished, we can send people to the Geocity shop," Feng Xiu said. "Even though we didn't experience an immortal tribulation, we still suffered a lot of losses. I'm afraid that Geocity hadn't fared any better. Elder Xiao Yun and Elder Duga Xiao, take some disciples to visit the Geocity shop to gain experience and help them however you can." "Yes." The two elders took the order and left. At this moment, residents in Geocity and soldiers of the Ju army were repairing the damaged structures. At this moment, Mr. Fang had just returned to his shop from the outside. Mr. Fang had a shop to manage and thus didn't participate in the cleanup after they forced back the flood with spells. After all, he had an important thing to do, receiving the reward from the system. New task, play safely and peacefully at the Internet Cafe. 3, completed. Task description, task target, fight back with the most dominating method. Show the world that any people who dare to mess with the shop will bear the consequences. Task reward, 1 immortal peach gift box. There is a chance to get an unripe immortal peach, lower chance to get a ripe immortal peach, and the lowest chance to get a 6,000-year-old immortal peach. 1-2 random items. The quality of the items in the gift boxes will be determined by the performance. Task rating. Degree of counterattack, B. Toughness of attitude, A. Level of warning, A. Comprehensive rating, A. The odds of obtaining top-tier items after opening the gift box increased by 5%. The odds of obtaining low-tier items after opening the gift box decreased by 20%. Reward, Immortal Peach Gift Box, Advanced. Do you want to claim the reward? Is this a new function after the big upgrade of the system? In his room in the GeoCity shop, Mr. Fang glanced at the interface and chose to claim the reward. Soon, an antique-looking gift box with wooden engravings appeared before Mr. Fang. This treasure chest, I hope I'm not so out of luck that I get an unripe immortal peach. Highly pleased, Mr. Fang stared at the treasure chest before him and opened it slowly. Then, a bunch of items jumped out. A series of system prompts appeared. You obtained 3,000-year-old immortal peach 1. You obtained the godly weapon disassembler 1. Can be used to disassemble the godly weapons that you had gotten in the past but do not need anymore. According to the quality of the items, you can obtain at least 1 godly weapon fragment. You obtained godly weapons, Wangxiu sword and Xi sword. Oh, I seemed to have gotten some good stuff. Mr. Fang examined the items that he got carefully in excitement. He murmured thoughtfully, Wangxiu, Xi. Without a doubt, these 2 swords are godly weapons. Besides, they contain powerful spiritual energies which can raise an average half-immortal to a true immortal. I guess they can do more than that since the sword energies coming off them are brighter than those in the game. They must have absorbed all the energy of the demon world and achieved the ultimate state. They can bring a whole faction to ascend. Of course, Mr. Fang didn't have the intention of bringing one faction to ascend. Besides, the ascendants in the 2 worlds worked differently. However, the power that these 2 swords could unleash was extremely great. Then, Mr. Fang looked at the strange godly weapon disassembler. I can at least get 1 godly weapon fragment. After all, some of the treasures that he had obtained were sitting idle in his storage artifact. Some were good for collection, but some were not collectibles and would find better use to be disassembled. Besides, Mr. Fang thought, if I can get more godly weapon fragments, can I trade them for a permanent godly weapon? Should he keep these fragments or use them to trade for another godly weapon? He would decide later when he found out how many fragments he would get. The system is really nice. The last item was a 3,000-year-old immortal peach. He was a little disappointed that it wasn't a 6,000-year-old immortal peach, but a 3,000-year-old immortal peach was not bad. According to Journey to the West, after eating a 3,000-year-old immortal peach, a mortal can understand the immortal Tao and extend his lifespan. Eating a 6,000-year-old immortal peach can make me ascend with mist and obtain immortality. Fang Chi thought, what's the realm of understanding immortal Tao? Is it the earthly immortal realm? And eating a 6,000-year-old immortal peach will make me achieve the heavenly immortal realm? Earthly immortal realm. Mr. Fang scratched his ears and cheeks. It seems like I still can't ascend. But it would greatly increase his cultivation strength. With greater cultivation strength, he would find it easier to synchronize with different characters. There were many benefits. Soon, Mr. Fang turned his gaze toward the extra-large peach. The ripe immortal peach looked appetizing. It looked as if Fang Chi would smell the rich peach fragrance with one bite of it. Looking at the big peach, Mr. Fang was secretly pleased. I'm smart to open the treasure chest in your city shop, so you can't see it. After all, he felt a bit guilty after remembering that he was always taking snacks from her. After all, she is in the distant East continent and doesn't know that I have this big and sweet immortal peach. I'm going to eat it now. He would pretend nothing had happened after eating it. Bam, bam, bam. A small hand pushed open the half-closed door, and a small head poked in. Boss, can I come in? Everyone is playing downstairs. Why are you hiding in the room by yourself? Sitting at the desk while facing the door, Mr. Fang stared at her dumbfoundedly with the extra-large peach in his hand. How come you're here? How come you have such a big peach? Jiang Xiaoyu's big eyes stared at the immortal peach in surprise. Xiaoyu? Mr. Fang put the peach on the desk calmly and said, I have a very delicious peach. Do you want to eat it? Yes, yes. Jiang Xiaoyu nodded repeatedly. How about this? You take one bite, and I take a bite. We share it fairly, okay? Wow, really? Jiang Xiaoyu giggled happily with her eyes curved up like new crescent moons. After all, whenever they had good food in the past, the moment that she took a small bite, the shop owner had gobbled down the rest. But this time, he is acting fair and even offered to take turns to eat it. Of course. Mr. Fang said solemnly, I've never mistreated you, Xiaoyu, right? Here. He handed the peach to her. Can I really? Jiang Xiaoyu was bashful, but looking at the peach, she couldn't resist the temptation. Then, I'll take a small bite first. Then, she took a small bite bashfully. Wow, it's so delicious. The fragrance of the peach penetrated her internal organs as if her whole body was soaked in the hot spring. Jiang Xiaoyu squinted her eyes with great enjoyment. When she opened her eyes again, she only saw a peach pit on the desk while Mr. Fang, with his mouth full of peach, said blurrily, okay, we finished it. We each took one bite. It was super fair. Jiang Xiaoyu was stupefied. Chapter 847, Demonic God. Who? On the second floor in the Jua City shop, Mr. Fang felt the qi in his body. After training in the cultivation room for a long time, he had managed to increase his cultivation strength from level 8 to level 9. At this moment, the essence transformed from the immortal peach circulated in his body and strengthened his physical form and the pure essences in his body. During the process, his cultivation strength went through a huge transformation. At this moment, Jiang Xiaoyu had just walked down from upstairs. In the lounge area in the shop, the disciples from different major academies such as the Linian Academy and Shengjing Academy gathered together, coming for a friendly visit. The core disciples from the heavenly faction sat with them and discussed about cultivation strength. The two big disciples in our faction have rather high cultivation strength. Despite their young ages, they have respectively reached the 7th tier and the 9th tier of level 8, Elder Xuanhuan said in pleasure. Look at them. At this moment, Su Danji rolled her eyes at her two young disciples, Feng Wu and Xin. They are almost level 9 now, but you two haven't reached level 8 yet. You must play the games more diligently. Do you hear me? Yes, master. They looked dejected. However, talking about cultivation strengths, Su Tanji pointed at Nalan Mingsu who sat nearby and said, we must mention our little Nalan who is a great example in the Celestial Warrior Association in our Dajin. She's only in her 20s, but her cultivation strength has reached level 8, in her 20s 21. Level 8. The heavenly faction disciples looked at Nalan Mingsu in astonishment, so powerful. Hey! Here's Xiaoyu, here is Xiaoyu. While they exclaimed, they saw Xiaoyu walking over. Su Danji immediately pulled Jiang Xiaoyu to her side and said with great sincerity and affection, Xiaoyu, it's been a long time since I last saw you. How is your cultivation strength now? Has it increased? Look at your elder sister Alan, she has reached level 8. Really? Jiangxi Oyu said with embarrassment, you guys improve so fast. You haven't reached level 8, right? They comforted her, you're quite good already. Yeah, she's so young, in fact. Burp. Suddenly, she had a hiccup, and her presence rose sharply. Huh? Jiangxi Oyu said doubtfully, I seem to have reached level 9. What? The games, movies, and TV series could help people increase their cultivation strength, but the people with greater talents would increase their cultivation strength faster. This rule also applied in here, and the only difference was that the talent needed in the shops was the talent of playing games, which was quite different from conventional talent. Of course, gameplay talents aside, if one had excellent cultivation talent or found a special cultivation method extremely fitting for one's conditions, they could achieve great growth in cultivation strength with diligent training even if they had poor talent in gaming. Anyone with one of the two kinds of talents could obtain fast progression if they worked hard. Of course, the people with both talents would double the speed in their cultivation. Nalan Mingsu belonged to the latter group, and her cultivation strength had been much higher than her peers due to her extremely high talents from the very beginning. Right now, her advantage over others was still obvious. But this damn girl has such great talents. 21 Her talents aren't even inferior compared to those of people in the East continent. Having finished regulating his breathing, Mr. Fang walked down from upstairs and mumbled to himself. On second thought, he wasn't surprised. After all, the veteran players had played games in the shops for a long time and had watched many TV series, accumulating lots of experience. However, the new players in the East continent had comparatively weak foundations. If the talented disciples such as Yu Yin, one of the key disciples of the heavenly faction, had entered the shop soon after it was opened, she would probably have reached level 9 by now. But now, whether it was the skills that they learned from the champions in League of Legends or the Tao lecture given by Patriarch Subodhi, they obtained less understanding than the veteran players. It must be noted that Patriarch Subodhi only taught Sun Wukong for 7 years. These people were not as talented as Sun Wukong, who was born from the heavens and earth, but with a deep understanding of the fundamentals, their growth wasn't slow. In the past few days, Mr. Fang explained to them the content in the first few episodes of Journey to the West, doing the system's task of Challenger's tutorial school. However, the Origins Internet Club always promoted the combination of work and entertainment. Standing up from his chair, Song Qingfeng stretched and said, I'll stop watching now. I'll go to Dungeon Fighter Online to use up the fatigue points. Then I will spend several hours playing League of Legends. Allocating game time reasonably was a good habit. Ding ding dong dong. With crisp music, he entered the game. Meanwhile in the half-city shop after the storm stopped, the flood gradually retreated. After the rain stopped, the city looked clean and fresh after the washing of the rain. Standing on the edge of half-city, one could clearly see that the other half of the city had completely sunk into the ocean, looking like a broken cliff. The ocean waves below the cliff clashed with the black rifts. Looking out toward the distant ocean from the uneven edge of the cliff, the ocean looked darker the deeper it went. As if coming from a distant dreamland, a faint singing rose with the ocean breeze, sounding like murmurs of ocean beasts. The words seemed to be in another language. Standing on the cliff on the shore was a figure who was dressed in a dark green long dress, and her pretty long hair draped over her shoulders like ocean waves. The two sharp fangs protruding from her red lips showed that she was a hybrid of humans and demons. She stared at the distant yellow spring sea. The turbid ocean water seemed to conceal another world underneath. According to the legends, despite the undeterminable age, the turbid ocean was at least 10,000 years old, having a much longer history than the cultivators in Half-City. At this moment in the Half-City shop, a black cloud was bragging on live stream, scummy shop owner. 10,000 years later, I ensure you that he will call me Granddaddy with great respect." Then, it picked up a bottle of Coke and slurped through the straw. Slurp, ah! He has no idea how great my clan is. From the prehistoric times, gods and immortals lived above the eternal high mountains and vast sky, while the existences opposite to them lived in the endless darkness. They were called demonic gods or evil gods. The darkness didn't refer to a specific place. No one knew where it was. Perhaps it didn't exist in the mortal world. In the dark and deep void, horrifyingly huge corpses half buried in the dust could be seen scattered around, carrying the roars of roaming ghosts. The yellow winds seemed to be able to tear open a person's soul. We can't defeat them on the center stage battlefield. A low roar as deep as the land rose in the void. I think we should change our strategy. How? Another voice said. We can take the road in the mortal world. Our clan has planned this for a long time. It's time to carry it out. The heaven-devouring turtle has absorbed enough spiritual essence, and when the time is right, the weak mortals will pose no threat to us and will become a good food supply for our army. The booming voice that was as deep as an earthquake said, "This is a good plan." In the endless void, a huge shadow waved its 4 feet and slowly moved toward a certain direction. Meanwhile, in the City shop "Are you ready to take on Anton?" With a casual glance, Song Kingfing saw the picture of a huge turtle on Alan Minksu's screen. This huge turtle was as giant as a prehistoric continent. The 7th Apostle Anton. It also had all kinds of horrifying coexisting monsters around it. Chapter 848. The tough challenge begins. Fully awoken to body's wondrous truths, he cuts off Mara, returns to the root, and joins primal spirit. In a quiet secret chamber in the Nalan family, Nalan Hongwu sat cross-legged with his palms facing upward, recalling the content of Patriarch Subodhi's lecture on Tao and Mr. Fang's explanation. He tried to obtain his own understanding and inspiration. He put all of these insights to verify his own cultivation and tried to merge them. A presence much more powerful than before was activated continuously. Among the players in the shop, some concentrated on one cultivation area while some tried every style before choosing one of them as their specialization. Of course, people made different choices in different continents according to their own customs and styles. For example, in the East Continent and the continent of immortal relics, the majority of people were like Nalan Hongwu and mostly focused on the legend of sword and fairy. The turbulent homeland, wind and cloud, dungeon fighter online, and the journey to the west. In contrast, the people in the West Continent preferred World of Warcraft, Dark Souls, and League of Legends, in which most champions had similar styles to their own. In the Xuanhuan City shop, due to the Ultimate West Realm people who had continuously played Dungeon Fighter Online from the max level 60 expansion until now, this game was more popular than in the other shops. The shop with the second most Dungeon Fighter Online players was the Half City shop. Of course, the new shops in the East Continent and Kanglan City had the least players of this game. With the arrival of the new expansion, the janitors in the shop such as Jessica were busy doing the translation of the official novel and spin-off stories during their free time. In the lounge area of the Xuanhuan City shop, the awesome janitor team consisting of a blonde beauty and 2 handsome foreign-looking men was doing the translation with large piles of documents around them. There was only a basic introduction on the official website, people couldn't find detailed information on it. These janitors' job was collecting clues from the storyline and different quests and compiling them into articles before posting them on the official forum and main post bars for the players to read and understand. Next to them were piles of materials about Arthas and Frostmourne in the Wrath of Lich King expansion that would be released later. 7th Apostle Anton was a supergiant turtle that was carrying a huge volcano on its back. According to the legends, when it fully spread its giant body, it could reach the edge of the world. Feeding on energy, it swallowed the energy from the whole world greedily and could lead to the exhaustion of the world. After destroying its own world by exhausting all the energy in it, Anton came to this continent. This game was different from other games. For example, in The Legend of Sword and Fairy 4, it was the ninth heaven mystic fairy who had finally defeated Xuanhuan, while the players could only submit to their destiny while doing the best they could. In World of Warcraft, players couldn't kill the ancient god Cthulhu. They only acted as the vanguards and did supporting work to consume some of its energy. It was because at that time, the players were weak and didn't have the ability and power to handle crises on that big of a scale. However, as time went on, they had gradually grown stronger. These players were no longer the small figures who could do nothing but follow the masters and do some supporting work. They had gradually stepped onto the historic arena. Regardless of who they were in the real world, they were real geniuses in the games. As time went on, they experienced one catastrophe after another and obtained more understanding of more powerful ultimate techniques. They had surpassed their trainers and risen to the same level of those powerful existences whom they had looked up to. Therefore, in the battle of blocking the seventh apostle, these players were the absolute main force. At this moment, on the screens of the players from the Ultimate West Realm as well as people such as Zongwu and Nalan Mingsu, a vast ocean under a quiet night sky appeared. Looking through the sea mist, they could vaguely see a giant continent where a blazing fire was burning. They looked carefully and recognized that the vast continent was in fact the giant body of a prehistoric giant turtle, and on the turtle's back was a volcano erupting high into the sky. This turtle's four legs extended into the bottomless ocean, looking like four pillars that were supporting the sky. Its huge feet stood on the bottom of the ocean while its body stood high up above the vast ocean. For this giant apostle, it walked in the vast ocean as easily as trudging through a creek. At this moment in the internet cafe, players such as Song King Fing stood behind the players in the game and watched as the huge continent gradually filled the whole screen. FCK. It will burst the screen. Meanwhile, a huge battleship flanked by several smaller battleships flew across the sky in a V-shaped formation and then spread out in one line. They blocked the way of the huge turtle. On the huge battleship named Noble Sky, the people stood on the bow with their ropes flapping in the strong ocean wind. Some of them carried magnificent and dazzling heavy swords on their backs with blood-red eyes and ugly bloody hands, and some were dressed in military uniforms and placed huge crosses before them, and some wore grey Taoist robes and slowly tied a black gauze over their eyes. There were about 20 of them, a team consisting of the top-level adventurers, players, in the whole game. What they faced was a huge thing on the ocean. Meanwhile, outside Half City, under the deep and deadly silent water in the Yellow Spring Sea was an endless abyss. The deeper it went, the darker it got. A dark and evil presence surged with the hidden currents at the bottom of the ocean. The hidden currents grew more rapid at the dark ocean bottom, which was tagged as the Forbidden Zone by all cultivators in this sea area. In the silent roars of the sea monsters and demons at the ocean bottom, a tiny crack seemed to appear in the bottomless ocean abyss. Vague gloomy light dots seemed to pierce through the crack, and the water began to pour back. Vaguely, an extremely huge turtle foot seemed to appear. Frightened by the horrifying presence, countless demons at the bottom of the ocean scrambled to flee. A voice seemed to say in the darkness, "I'm surprised that there is a path in this place that can lead to the mortal world." The heaven-devouring turtle consumed lots of energy to widen the crack. Another voice said, "Even though the essence in the mortal world is not as abundant as that in our world, it can still replenish our stock. Of course, this natural supply depot can support us for months. Our clan will win this war." In the Jua City shop, Half City shop, and Yuanyang City shop, on the screens was the great ocean in the dark night and the red clouds in the sky illuminated by the blazing huge fire. A vast mass of black mist spread out on the ocean. The vast black mist gradually devoured everything in the surrounding area. The visibility was instantly reduced to the minimum. Gloomy winds came in the darkness, and no one knew how many demons were hidden in the mist. The teams are formed. With a scroll that laid out the plans for the battle in his hand, Zhongwu said in a loud voice, "Let's clear the origin of the black mist first. Everyone in the challenge team, go." People leapt off from the deck, while unsheathing their blades and kicking hard on the sea surface, they shot toward a giant beast in the ocean like cannonballs. The tough challenge begins. Chapter 849. Begin to synchronize with the great sage, heaven's equal, sir. At this moment, Jiangxi Oyu came to Mr. Fang bashfully and asked with eagerness, "Do you still have peaches just like the one that we ate last time?" Whenever she remembered its taste, she would wonder, how come there is such a delicious peach in the world? She looked at Mr. Fang eagerly. After all, the snacks that were out of stock had been later for sale again, so she wondered if this kind of delicious peach would be sold later as snacks. Oh, that. Mr. Fang thought for a while. Not now. Really? How about in the future? Seeing the disappointment on Jiangxi Oyu's little face, he immediately said, "In the future. There might be." "Really?" Jiangxi Oyu asked in elation. Of course. After all, he had a peach pit in his hand. Mr. Fang wondered if he could really grow a peach tree. He thought for a moment and decided that it wasn't possible for now. After all, he couldn't find any spiritual field that could be compared to the Garden of Immortal Peaches. The Garden of Immortal Peaches was a place in heaven after all. He waved at Jiangxi Oyu and said, "Go and play now. If you want to eat peaches, you can buy golden spiritual peaches from Donking Lai's restaurant. They are top quality peaches with good taste. I must go upstairs and cultivate now." "Really?" Jiangxi Oyu took out her smartphone happily. "I'll buy some right now, and they will probably deliver them to me very soon, right?" "Yeah, they can deliver them to me." "How long will this take?" Mr. Fang asked. "About half an hour." Jiangxi Oyu answered without thinking, "Their business is getting better and better. The deliveries used to take much less time." "Oh. Then, I'll come down in half an hour." With that said, Mr. Fang went upstairs. The god's palace stood tall on the high mountains. This was the residence of the gods worshipped by the humans in the West continent. According to the legends, they lived on the high mountains in the godly realm. On the mountains and in the oceans, there were their cities and godly nations. The god's palace was the holiest place even for gods, because only the most powerful gods had the right to live here. At this moment outside the god's palace stood lines of honor guard team which looked extremely solemn and grave. They seemed to be waiting for the arrival of an existence. The bright red luxurious carpet made with fire phoenix plumes spread to the end of the passage. An army walked toward them, emitting chilly murderous spirit as if they had just returned from a hellish battleground. The leader was dressed in full solemn dark golden godly armor, a red battle skirt, and had a golden battle spear in her hand. Did the filthy devil gods retreat? A god dressed in 5-colored godly armor walked toward them. If people who had been to the radiant light godly nation saw him, they would find that this god's features looked almost identical to the statue of the god of radiant light. Yeah, those filthy devil gods retreated. From the looks of it, they don't have any plans to send out troops again for the time being. She pulled off her golden helmet and revealed her brown long hair that was pulled up in a bun. Holding her helmet in her arm, she walked toward the depths of the shiny golden palace along the bright red carpet. "I'll get bored again." Strangely, her face that as exquisite as an angel looked quite like Princess Isabella of the radiant light godly nation. "I heard that there are some problems in the mortal world again. A powerful devil god has grown strong and is making trouble in the mortal world." Hee. Powerful? The god of radiant light said with a little contempt. "If all he can do is mingle with the monkeys in the mortal world, it means that he's only a monkey with greater strength. My doppelganger in the mortal world awakened some time ago," the goddess said. "She sent me lots of useful information." "What, is the undefeatable Valkyrie interested in these monkeys?" It must be noted that the goddess with the title Undefeatable Valkyrie had never lost a battle in the wars against the various devil gods. She said casually, If they can survive in the hands of the self-important wastrels from the innumerable immortal sea, I don't mind teaching the small monkeys that are messing around in the mortal world a lesson while I'm on vacation. At this moment, Mr. Fang had just entered the cultivation room, and a scene appeared before him. A monkey dressed in golden armor and holding the golden hoop trod looked up at the sky, which was filled with 100,000 heavenly generals and soldiers who were standing on the clouds. The flag with the words, "The Great Sage, Heaven's Equal," flapped in the wind. Synchronization rate with the Great Sage, Heaven's Equal, 10.3%. Complete synchronization in this space, available. After his cultivation strength surpassed the pinnacle stage of Ascendance Realm, and he could use the dual swords, Wangxiu and Xi, in this space. Fang Chi's synchronization efficiency improved greatly. With continuous cultivation and training, he had reached the lowest requirement to synchronize with the Great Sage, Heaven's Equal. Do you want to start the synchronization, yes or no? Yes. The still scene suddenly turned alive. Brandishing the golden hoop trod with great presence, he soared up into the sky while riding on a cloud and charged at the immortal soldiers and godly generals. In the Jia City Shop, Half City Shop, and Yuan Yang City Shop, large groups of players either stood behind the computers or watched the live stream on their communication jades. You can fight in a team in this game. Having played the game for a long time in the past, Su Tanji stood behind Nalan Mingsu with a box of spicy sticks in her hands, looking at the latter's screen in amazement while eating. It must be noted that the players in this game could always form teams of 4. This rule had never changed. To deal with this giant prehistoric turtle, the challenge team consisted of 20 powerful adventurers, players, and had the backup of elite troops from Empyrean. On the huge battleship were all kinds of super large cannons. The most strikes that they launched were cooling radiation waves so that the adventurers could have a landing spot on Anton's hot surface. This method also prevented part of the lava from exploding by accident. The players were divided into 5 teams with different missions. The division was made after careful research of this quest. Obviously, they had tried it many times before. On the screen, the extremely huge ocean beast pulled one of its giant feet from the ocean and struck out. Instantly, the ocean water surged up, forming a horrifying tsunami. More horrifying was that the water drops splashing out by the huge foot shot out like giant cannonballs, launched with tremendous momentum. Even these simple attacks were destructive. Mages were the first group that shot up into the sky, and then the 5 teams of players such as slayers, priests, and Nen masters shot up into the sky like sharp arrows. Dodging the dense attacks, they flew swiftly toward the only firelight remaining on Anton. They landed on Anton's huge head. But Anton was different from most of the other giant monsters. With other monsters, if people landed on their bodies, they had no other options but to shake their bodies to get rid of the tiny bugs. However, Anton was like a moving giant fortress with consciousness. On its body lived a species that was coexisting with Anton, much like rhinos and oxpeckers in real life. In fact, the coexisting monsters were also powerful, and some of them had a level of strength on par with apostles. Anton opened its huge mouth and spat out black mist together with large quantities of monsters. Behind the monsters was an extremely huge horrifying monster which had scales on its body and interlacing sharp teeth on its belly. Like a horrifying giant vertical mouth, the huge crack opened and revealed a void-like black hole in the belly, releasing a huge sucking force that could pull in everything it saw. It gave people the feeling that the souls of the living creatures imprisoned in the abyss-like black hole in the belly could never enter the next life cycle. Everyone, be careful. They all looked grim. Tog. TL note: Tog is a type of monster in Dungeon Fighter Online. The monster is known as the Devour Demon, as one of his abilities was to create a large circle under him, and he will attempt to suck players in. Players in close proximity will take massive damage and heal. Tog. Chapter 850. The Black Mist wiped out the team. There are beginner gift bags and returning veteran gift bags on the official website. Have you claimed them? At this moment, the elf players who had just entered the game in the Kanglan City shop finally leveled up to the maximum level. Salah accepted the quest for the second awakening and asked, I did. This game has lots of free good stuff? Rowling said cheerfully, there are so many gift bags that I don't have time to claim them all. I claimed many fatigue recovery potions, level up coupons, experience capsules, and a set of purple equipment. Helen had recently been pulled into the game by the elves. She spent most of her time in World of Warcraft and would play this game occasionally. After all, unlike others, she only played one character and would use all the fatigue points in 1 hour at most. Have you guys reached the maximum level? Elder Sully yelled. If you have, we can do the awakening quest together. Okay. In the old shops in Xuanhuan City, Half City, and Jua City, the players were different from those beginners. In the past when they were in the Shadow Thunderland, they almost died in the siege of a large group of zombies. But now, they were facing a sea of monsters. Standing on the edge of Anton's huge head, the adventurers felt like they were standing by the cliff of a huge mountain. They were forced to the very edge by the thick and vast black mist and the endless monsters that were flying out from Anton's mouth. The ocean of black monsters almost devoured them. Controlling a Hellbringer, Gabriel exchanged a look with Zuyang Xiao, the Blacklight Sword Saint. Almost at the same time, a cloud of heaven-devouring blood essence began to spread. Then, with a huge shockwave, it devoured everything around it like a huge ocean wave. Blood boom. Lightning draw sword. A sword energy torn open the sky and shot out from the blood explosion. Instantly, the chilly sword energy almost swept across the whole land on Anton's head. Illusion sword dance. Other players' powerful ultimate moves almost struck at the same time. Chilly ice and flames collided, and sword energies swept out in all directions. Like the leaves that were swept away by the autumn gust, the monsters were all cleared. The Blacklight Sword Saint had a blood-red huge lightsaber in his hand. Beside him, Gabriel held a huge chilly blade that was emitting shiny golden light, showing that it wasn't an ordinary weapon. Be careful of the Tog. The moment that the warning came, they saw a black figure crashing down at them. The huge and ugly body landed in the crowd in the blink of an eye, and they saw that the Tog had 4 heads. It landed in the herd of monster and the destructive explosions caused by the magic spells and sword energies. All the players who had attacked it saw the words on their game interface, you afflicted 1 point of damage to the Tog. Bathed in the violent attacks from the adventurers, it received almost no damage except for a few shallow white scratches on its vicious scales. The void black hole in its belly opened, and a horrifying suction force drew almost everyone toward that horrifying black hole. The fires that it spat out looked like an erupting volcano. More importantly, when it spat out fires, powerful energy spread all over its body, bouncing back any attacks that were aimed toward it. At this moment, they could afflict 0 damage, not even 1 point of damage. Follow the plan. Zhongwu glanced at the Empyrean battleship that was hovering in the sky. Send signals. The adventurers were the main force while the military force from Empyrean was there. Reinforcements. In fact, during the previous main quest, the players had done a complete exploration before the military force created the plan. At this moment, the main force and reinforcements both played important roles. For the monsters like the Tog, not even battleship cannons could afflict damage to it, let alone average attacks. Perhaps it had the same ability as Anton and could devour all energy. While biting into the peach that she had just bought, Jiangxi Oyu watched the battle on the screen in surprise. How do you battle it? We have ways to deal with it. Nalan Mingsu and other members of the group were obviously well prepared. She said, this monster has high elemental resistances and is almost immune to all elements. Also, its resistance to non-elemental attacks has reached 99.5%. At this moment, the reinforcements in the sky dropped light, fire, ice, and shadow orbs which emitted faint energy light. They were very eye-catching in the dark night sky. Light! Xuanhuan yelled while the long saber in his hand lit up with a pure white dazzling light. Fire! In the night sky, Nalan Mingsu lifted her huge blood-colored sword, and blazing flames immediately burned on it. She leapt up into the air, and her sword drew an arc which looked like a meteorite shower, driving the light orb with blazing flames into the empty belly. At this moment, a hot presence spread inside the tog. This huge monster's scales gradually turned red like that of a roasted shrimp. With a pathetic howl, it crashed toward Nalan Mingsu viciously. With a clean duck, she dodged the strike perfectly. A sword energy of blazing flames slashed out, finally leaving a shallow scorched line on its scales. "Look, we can use same elemental attacks on it," Nalan Mingsu explained. As if feeling the high temperature in the game, she wiped the sweat off her forehead and said, "I've been studying it lately." "Oh. So troublesome?" Song Qingfeng said, "Only your weapon has fire elements. Does it mean that only you can fight the tog?" Sort of." While they spoke, on the screen, a horrifying black storm rose around the tog. The storm connected with the thunder clouds in the sky, looking like a huge pillar connecting the sky and the land. All the attacks were shattered by the storm. The members who couldn't dodge in time were instantly swept into the storm. Even Nalan Mingsu was swept into it. FCK. The team is about to be wiped out. Song Qingfeng yelled. Impossible. The members who had dropped to the ground instantly revived with full HP after a light pillar flashed in the sky. Use life tokens. In one group dungeon, players could use no more than 12 life tokens. Besides, they found that Nalan Mingsu's skills including the awakening skills could be used again. She had instantly returned to her prime state. Puh. Song Qingfeng's face darkened. It costs 1 crystal each. How many of such revives could they afford? A while ago, I bought over 10 Labor Day gift bags, Nalan Mingsu said. I got hundreds of life tokens for free. That's a good deal. Liang Shay, a veteran player, was also watching the game while standing behind her. You get hundreds of coins this way. This gift bag sounds good. Song Qingfeng agreed. Over 10 gift bags cost more than 3,000 crystals, right? Jiangxi Oyu mumbled beside them. Huh? Everyone exchanged a look.